Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome aboard The Shallows, the pod designed specifically for all you 10-team and smaller league managers. We're setting sail to explore the hidden depths of shallow leagues, navigating the treachery, the tactics, and the expert maneuvering it takes to win your matchups and hoist that trophy. I'm your captain, Eric Henriksen, alongside Chief Mate. We looked it up. It's not first mate, it's Chief Mate, Carson Picard. Carson, how are the Seas faring today?
Seas are faring just fine, Eric. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to get this rolling. We've got a ton to talk about today, and we're going to set sail here in just a minute.
Yeah, we're both repping our teams. I got the Yankees, and Carson has the Twins. So this is our first episode. We're really excited to set sail here. But, who are we? Like, who are these two guys talking about shallow league fantasy baseball? Carson, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
I think on Pitcher List, my actual description of who I am is I am a writer based in Minnesota who spent time in Winnipeg, so I'm all too familiar with the cold and crushing defeat. I'm a Twins fan. I've been a writer at Pitcher List here on the Going Deep team for a couple of years, talking about all sorts of different things. And this is one of the first times I'm going to be hosting a podcast. Very excited to be talking about these shallow leagues here with Eric, and really excited to really give a great voice into a kind of untouched part of fantasy baseball discourse, the people that can't get 12 friends together. So we're going to be rolling here.
I am one of those people who can't get 12 friends together. So I have become an expert. I have become an expert in the shallow league format. I've been playing fantasy baseball for over 20 years. My God, saying that is just wild. I am actually new to the Pitcher List team. So if you go to my Pitcher List page, you won't see much of anything there. I did have the opportunity to host a panel with Frank Stamfel and Vlad of during the PitchCon this year, and it was great. It was about sleeper pitchers, and so I'm just excited to really get going here and talking about shallow leagues and teach everybody kind of what I've learned over the last 20 years of playing this and winning several championships, including 2 last year. So I'm really excited to get going. Just a little humble brag there for you from your captain. So what is this podcast going to be about? Well, we kind of told you a little bit. This is The Shallows. We're focusing on just that, shallow leagues in fantasy baseball with head-to-head category slant. It is the most popular format. Again, and as Carson said, most people can't get 12 friends together. So you play in categories leagues, you play in 10-team or shallower leagues. We're going to touch on some other formats naturally as we go through our discourse here. And of course, there's going to be plenty of aquatic puns thrown in for good measure. Credit to Carson for giving me the heads up to that.
You guys have no idea at home. Like it was, we were talking about it, and Eric's eyes just lit up when the idea of just putting them in, and suddenly the whole script was filled with them. I was like, what have I created? But we're rolling with it,
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let me tell you, I can't wait to incorporate Pirates and Mariners puns in here, because don't forget, there are 2 nautical teams in Major League Baseball. Actually, there's 3 if you want to include the Marlins, but who remembers that they exist sometimes? So we have fun segments planned for you, including unique takes on some classics, like current news, or as we're going to call it, current events. Current.
We'll come up with a better name for that.
We will. Maybe. We'll get there. We have some other things planned that already have some great titles. We're going to hold those back and really let them surprise you as we move along here. So on today's show, like I said, we have current events, player movement that matters this offseason. Yes, of course, there was Kyle Tucker, but we got some more less obvious ones that may have impacted fantasy value into this season. We're going to talk strategy, setting yourself up for success. And also, we're going to talk about advanced stats, what they are, and how to best use them in shallow formats. But before we officially leave port here, there's a pun for you. We release a new episode every Friday morning, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. So leave us a 5-star rating, a like, a thumbs up, a kind review. It goes a long way in helping us out. And don't forget, we're part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network, so check out the other pods we have available. There are new episodes daily from all the different shows that we have. And visit pitcherlist.com for all the latest and greatest content published daily as well, including from our very own chief mate here, Carson, who recently published part 2 of a series of articles he's writing about BABIP. Carson, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Crushed that intro paragraph. Thank you. Well, batting average on balls in play is one of the weirdest stats. It's one of the most used stats in baseball. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I took a really deep dive into how to use it with pitchers, and I came up with some really interesting conclusions, I think, and released part 2 recently talking about individual pitchers, how you can use them to or how you can use BABIP to analyze them for the upcoming season, whether that BABIP's sustainable or not. It's really fun time. Tons of graphs, tons of charts. You should totally check it out. Part 3 and part 4 should be coming up sometime during spring training. So stay on the lookout.
Very excited to dive into that. There's another pun for you. They are endless. Just, I mean, you even had one. You're diving deep. Anyway, so like pitchers and catchers this week, we are also all hands on deck as we prepare to set sail for the 2026 fantasy baseball season. Let's talk current events. All right, Carson. First up, we're going to head to Detroit, very close to your Minnesota Twins, very close to the Midwest there. Detroit, Framber and Verlander. A lot of pitching moves happening in Detroit this year as they look to contend in the American League Central. So big news, Framber Valdez signing a 3-year contract with Detroit and Justin Verlander returning to where it all began. Any changes in fantasy value for these two with this news?
Yeah, I think for Framber, maybe there could be something. I think, he's never been a guy that allows a lot of home runs, but the difference between going from Daikin and Houston and going over to Detroit, that's definitely like a cavernous outfield out there. I think, is it going to be really a huge tangible difference? We'll yet to see, especially for a guy like Framber Valdez, who the fly balls just aren't part of his game. But I think there's something there. Absolutely. I think he has a little uptick in value. I like Framber Valdez a lot. I think he's a guy, and we'll talk about this later. If you're looking for high floors, he's one of the top guys at high floors. He's going to get a really productive season just on the way he pitches. Justin Verlander, as much as I love the guy, all-time legendary pitcher, he is 43 years old, and for a shallow league format, there's really just no room to think about him outside of maybe a couple streaming starts. What this means is it's going to be a nice story, and we just hope that he has more of a Pujols season than a Adam Wainwright final season.
Yes, we really do hope that Verlander reaches that 300 win mark. I think that's what he's really aiming for here.
Oh, he's got no shot at that. But
oh wow,
he's like 45 off. How many wins does he have? I can look.
I think he's in the mid. I think he's somewhere between 260 and 275. I don't think he's pretty far, but I know he wants to keep pitching. He had a really good second half last season, which did make him relevant for streaming starts, which I think is why coming into this season, that's more of how you want to look at him. You don't want to be looking to draft Justin Verlander, but he very well could, going into a pitcher's park situation there, have a sleeper type season ahead. I understand he's 43, but he's always been relatively healthy in his career, minus the Tommy John years.
All the times he's healthy until he wasn't. He's at 200
healthy after it.
He was 266 wins at the moment, so the big milestone years not gonna happen. Verlander, I mean, the strikeout stuff is weird to think about. The strikeout stuff isn't there for him. Maybe you can make a case in really deep leagues. Listen, if you start in the Rockies at home, you can probably pick him up. But outside of that, I think we're just gonna say, Justin, do your best.
Yeah, fair enough. Staying right there in Detroit, Reese Olson, news came out that he is out for the season. This was a guy who many had on their sleeper pitchers list, a guy who was making noise last season before an injury set him back. Now he's hurt again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough loss for the bullpen. I mean, it's that time of year. It's that time of year, Eric. Pitchers and catchers reporting, and so do their physicians. So you know what that means.
It's kind of crazy just how many injuries were reported like 2 days ago.
Yeah, it always happens, and it's always not fun, but it's the way it goes.
Shifting over to the NL Central, they signed multiple free agents this year, and I just can't believe that somebody is spending money in Pittsburgh. But Marcell Ozuna signed a 1-year, $12 million contract with the Pirates. didn't really have much of a pun there, but Pirates news, like that's unusual, right? Marcell Ozuna, does he have a bounce back season this year?
Marcell Ozuna is up there in age. The under the hood stats still look pretty decent, but we're at that age. I think around 36 is where the bat speed really falls off. I think it's about a full tick on average. I think Marcell Ozuna is either at that age or even above it. So any real bounce back, I'm kind of scared of. It's not like you're looking at too much RBI potential in Pittsburgh. Even with that addition, they had the worst offense in baseball last year. But anyone can go on a heater.
Yeah, it's Marcell Ozuna. He's had ups and downs through his career. He's had great seasons. He's had totally lost seasons. He's coming off a totally lost season. And as you said, he's getting up there in age. You mentioned floor earlier. It's a pretty low floor. It's not a hitter's ballpark for an aging player with a bad surrounding cast. So I'm going to avoid, especially for a utility-only player. I don't want to clog up that spot, especially with a guy like Marcell Ozuna. Moving over to Cincinnati, we've got Eugenio Suarez signing with the Reds, going back home to where it all started. Another guy.
This is a cool one. Yeah. Eugenio Suarez is, I don't want to say he's super underrated or undervalued, but it seems like he has a lot of production for a guy that does not get a lot of recognition. And maybe it's just because he's been playing out west and a lot of East Coasters are sleeping, Eric. But he's like quietly has more than 30, getting to 40 home runs a year. And he does so playing enough. It's not like, Rodhan Odor had like a 40 home run season a while ago. And there was like, I think he had negative WAR during there. He's like 30 home run season. Whatever. Either way, you get the idea. It's like
Rodhan Odor may have had more landed punches than 40 home run seasons.
He had some pop in his bat while not being productive, but Suarez is a guy that has a lot of production to him. In Cincinnati, tiny outfield walls. I think Suarez has done this for years now. I don't really know what the concern is. He did in Seattle, right? That's about the going from pitcher's ballpark to hitter's ballpark. That seems like a natural upswing in production.
He was phenomenal in a couple seasons in Cincinnati earlier in his career. Then he had, I believe it was the COVID season. It just was a huge drop off. And then he got moved not too long after that. He hit almost 50 home runs several times in his career, including twice in Cincinnati. So I'm really looking at Suarez as a great value at third base. You look at what he did in Arizona before being moved to Seattle last year. He was terrible for the first 3 weeks of last season. So terrible, in fact, that I dropped him. He was a guy that I had drafted based off of the stellar end to the 2024 season that he had. I drafted him. He was just so awful in April last year to the point where it was actively hurting my roster. I dropped him. He went on a heater, and then he got traded to Seattle and came back down to earth because that is a terrible ballpark to hit in. It was terrible for him his previous time there too. So I'm glad he moved on and back to Cincinnati. I think Suarez is a great value at third base with 45 plus home run potential and a pretty decent surrounding cast around him. Look, if Ellie's on first base and Suarez is up and he hits one into the gap, that's an RBI. It's just high potential for counting stats there.
You mentioned that he struggled a bit in Seattle. He was still hitting 30 home runs there. That's the kind of thing where just like you're looking at raw home run totals. He can do that absolutely. And in OBP leagues, he's a little bit better even just because it's going to kind of work around the low average that player type is going to generate.
Yeah, absolutely. Suarez, again, great value, especially going back to Cincinnati. A prime landing spot, I think, for him. Staying in the National League, shifting closer to me in the New York vicinity, we have Luis Robert going over to the Mets. He is one of the most polarizing players in fantasy. We've seen the potential. We've seen the ceiling. We've seen the floor, or have we? Can it get worse? Is it the change of scenery? Will Luis Robert be relevant for us shallow leaguers this year?
There was a narrative that Robert was just simply not trying in Chicago. And let me ask you a question real quick. Let me pull this up just so I have the exact number. Is someone that isn't trying, would they steal 33 bases in 110 games?
No,
No,
because
that
that's
doesn't make sense.
33 times at least, not counting the caught stealing, that he risked getting hurt for a guy who gets hurt.
Exactly. Right. So I don't buy that narrative that he was just phoning it in, because guys that phone it in, first of all, I don't think Major League Baseball players phone it in. Athletes are built in the way that they're up there. They want to win every single game, right? The top guys do, at least.
Unless your name is Anthony Rendon. Anyway.
Yes, that's a different case. But he stole so many bases last year. I kind of just think, no, maybe we have to buy into this is who he is. Maybe a shift changes, but I think as a steals guy, he's really interesting. As a 117 max exit velocity slugger we saw several years ago, I think we've seen several years in a row where he has not been that. Who knows? It's weird. New things, new locations can change things. I don't really see it personally.
That's fair. Look, we're still early on in draft season for the types of leagues that we are talking about here and focusing on. It is February 12th, the day we're recording this. Pitchers and catchers just reported this week. So I would, for somebody like Robert, see how he does this spring with the new environment, see how he does in spring training, see how he's adjusting to having slightly more talented teammates around him. The injury bug is always a concern with him, but I would kind of keep an eye on him, see how his ADP is fluctuating during draft season. If it's on the rise and he's just too expensive, then maybe skip him. I appreciate the steals, but I'd want some more power out of a guy that does have a 117 max exit velo, and the average could also kill you at some point as well. Shifting over to the American League real quick, Chris Bassitt went to Baltimore a couple days ago, 1 year, $18 million contract. That's a guy who, up until the last couple seasons, was very relevant. He was relevant at points last year. Is Bassitt somebody with this change of scenery from Toronto to Baltimore, same division, that we can maybe take a look at this year?
Yeah, I think so at points, as someone that you can use against poor defenses. I think that's kind of a genre of pitcher that exists, someone that you would want to bench against the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees, your top guy, but against your Marlins, your Angels, your, what have you, your Twins, or you can probably start them and get away with it. I think Bassitt kind of slots in there. You know what he got. You know what he has. He pitches low velocity relatively now, but he actually does still manage quite well. I think he's a really late in the draft. We're going to be talking your final few picks and a 10-teamer even. But Chris Bassitt, he's 37 years old. He's up there. He had a sub-4 ERA last year. And for someone whose stuff is not that superb, he's kind of just done that year in, year out. I think what the Orioles is a pretty decent fit for him. They have a strong defense as well as a pretty decent park. And I think he could be someone that actually does have fantasy relevance.
Yeah, he's someone that I would just worry about the whip killing me, because even for the last few years, his whip's just been a little high to the point where I feel like he's been lucky to not give up more runs, but run prevention is a skill, so I think he's got that skill. He's got the veteran savvy. And you notice in this particular segment, we haven't taken too deep of a dive into the stats behind these numbers, that these surface level stats, because we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. But Bassitt, I do believe, is somebody who like you said, take at the end of the draft. And if he doesn't have it this year, you could just flip over that part of your roster. And we'll get into that strategy also in just a moment. But one last piece of news. Back to the National League. Spencer Schwellenbach to the 60-day IL to start the season. Man, that one hurts a little bit.
That one stings. Schwellenbach was like a lot of people's, I don't even want to call it a sleeper pick, but just a guy you really want to bet on. And the injury concerns with any of these really hard, exciting throwers sometimes, and it comes up and it's just so disappointing. And it's kind of the reality of baseball at the moment, is for young guys that are sitting 97, sometimes you have to pump the brakes a little bit and say, how long can they do it? This might be a whatever thing, in the grand scheme of things. It's bone spurs. They've been talking about it all the way back, I think, since October. And it's unfortunate that he's going to miss a little bit of time. But if he's back in April, it's just going to really suck, because one of the things, and we'll touch on this later, is you want spring training to be a way to evaluate a pitcher's health, what their fastball velocity is at, how are they feeling. And we're just not going to know that with Schwellenbach. It's going to be really open-ended here.
It's unfortunate because I do believe last year he had an elbow fracture similar to Michael King's injury from a few years ago. It's something you can come back from as a pitcher, but now these bone spurs, so another issue with the elbow, you start to get really concerned for a guy with all the talent in the world. Would you draft him and stash him anyway?
Yeah. I feel pretty comfortable saying, yeah. I mean, we're just looking at upside, and we'll segue this into strategy a little bit in a minute, but I think later in the draft, getting a chance to get a, frankly, top tier pitcher or second tier pitcher in the 20th round, yeah, I'll take that gamble. He might miss a month, maybe month and a half, I think. Maybe this is a Garrett Cole situation from a couple years ago where he misses like 4 months inexplicably. But I think you got to take a swing.
Yeah, especially if they're available late. Like you said, we're going to get into that in just a second as we head out to sea to talk strategy. All right, Carson, we're going to talk strategy here, from pre-draft to in-season work, how strategy differs for shallow leagues compared to deeper 12, 14, 15 or deeper team leagues, rosters where you have 30 guys on your team. So how do strategies for shallow leagues differ from other leagues? What makes it special?
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit before the show, and just looking at raw roster sizes and how many players we're really going to be talking about here. So let me just do the most basic math. If you're in an 8-team league, right? If you're in an 8-team league, and we're assuming, even a fairly large 25-man rosters, right? Relatively, simple math, that's 200 guys, right? Just for a frame of reference, I'm using the Fangraphs auction calculator here to do this. The 200th most valuable player is Brett Beatty, right? So, which kind of feels about right. Other guys around that list, Trevor Larnach, Connor Norby, Jock Peterson, Gavin Sheets, Brooks Lee, JP Crawford. There's a list of steady guys, ready producers, right? As it goes into a 10 league, the next 50 players, you see a pretty substantial drop off here as we're really getting into some of your rotational guys where playing time starts to become an issue. Davis Schneider, Christopher Morel, Patrick Bailey, Austin Hayes, all guys around the race. Now, the other thing to note is as we get into the difference from that to a 12-team league, and certainly into a 14, 15 league, you're adding about 30, 25, 30 guys that you have to consider. And that's just in the draft, right? Waiver wire, we talked about this before. The waiver wire really shifts as well. At that point, you start to get where things really become rotational. And these types of players that you find late start to not be steady guys. I mean, think about it. 30 teams in baseball, 26-man rosters. You're obviously looking at well over, that's about 520 total players, right? But even if you're just talking about, that's your middle relievers, we don't really care about them. If you're talking in bench players, you look at starting lineups, 270, right? And as you go into a 12-team league, you have talking about 300 players. Obviously, that's excluding pitchers, but the point remains is the percentile of players that really matter gets smaller and smaller as the leagues get bigger, of course. And so as you're looking at shallow league drafts, floor early is absolutely essential, because the later players become a little less relevant because everyone's going to have great players. Everyone is going to have your all-stars on the corners. You're not going to be able to find real big holes in people's rosters. Everyone's going to have some stuff. So the difference becomes who has the most stable floor and who can find a really strong ceiling with some of their later players in order to kind of min-max the draft a little bit.
I love that you touch on floor and ceiling and maximizing the ceiling of the players that you draft later. It's sometimes it's taking the big swings and trying to get the the Schwellenbachs later if they happen to fall. Yes, he's hurt, but that type of player. Can you find that the Tyler Soderstrom from last year late in the draft who becomes an extremely relevant player that really beats out their draft slot in terms of value? Those are the sleepers. Can you find the sleepers? Can you find the breakouts, the players who are going to go from, maybe the fringe to a foundational piece for your roster? You want to be able to find those players throughout the draft, and your strategy should be, am I drafting a player who's going to exceed their value at this draft slot throughout the season? That is the fundamental question to ask yourself when you're drafting. You should never go, oh, I need a shortstop, I'm going to take one. No, because if that point in the draft does not have a shortstop that will exceed their value at that draft slot, don't draft them. Wait, if you can. If you notice nobody else has a shortstop, well, then you want to beat everybody else to the punch. Let's say for some reason, nobody drafts a shortstop until round 8. I don't know why that would happen. It just might. It's crazier things have happened, Carson. So, maybe you go, okay, well, now I'm gonna take one because whoever I draft here, Lindor, Seager, doesn't matter. They're going to exceed their draft value in round 8. You want to try and do that throughout the draft at any point. Don't just draft a position because you need it. Draft it because the value is there.
And that's so true in shallow leagues because you're not going to miss out on this sudden shelf of players falling off. I mean, the real big shelf positions are like third and second base, right? Where you have kind of a steady stream of guys that are decent and then it falls off. That really is relevant in 14 and 15 leagues because you don't want to get stuck with Ernie
Clement.
Exactly. There you go. He's all right, but you don't want to get stuck. You don't want to get stuck with someone that's not great. JP Crawford is short or something like that. With shallow leagues, you look at the 10th best third baseman. They're still going to be really productive, or at very least, they're certainly going to be productive where you get them because they're not going to take a second third baseman. This corner infield slot, sure, but they're not going to take a lot of third basemen, right? Because there's not that many in the pool to take, and you can't start all of them. It's as simple as that. So it's just about being able to maximize value, zig when others are zagging, and try to build the best overall team, knowing that you're always going to find some positional value at different points in the draft.
So how do you approach roster construction as you're drafting? Are you looking early for, I'm going to set, I really want a big power speed combo guy at the beginning, and then I'm going to maybe take, a pitcher at round 2, not to get into the round by round specifics, because you have to adjust to how your draft goes. You can do 100 mock drafts. The second you get into your draft, it doesn't go anything like those mocks because your league settings should determine how the draft goes. If pitchers are more valuable, then they get taken first. If hitters are more valuable, then that happens. But if they're equally valued, this is when the strategy comes in. So how do you build your teams?
It's really dependent. Well, early on, I mean, the 5 category guys are going to go first. But that also does mean that later on, the 4 category guys, maybe someone, Kyle Schwarber is a great example. Aaron Judge, he's not really relevant now because he's so productive, but he was a few years ago. But for Kyle Schwarber, he's not going to steal backs, right? And that he's going to slip a little bit in the draft for that. And so your draft strategy may pivot depending on where you are in the first few rounds, what falls to you. And I think for hitters, stolen bases are what I'm going to call kind of a fringe category, one that isn't necessarily related to the other ones. It's related to runs a little bit, but the home run steals guys are very rare. Home run RBI and home run guys, on the other hand, that has a direct correlation between, right? So if you're looking to get steals, there's absolutely guys there. But if someone that does fall to you, and you always kind of want to have a guy fall to you. Sometimes you take your shots, but certainly in the early rounds, all of them are going to be good. You want a guy that has the maximum value, like we were talking about later. So early on, you want to sort of get an archetype for your team, I think. You have an idea, but you never want to pigeonhole yourself and say, I am going to build a team that does X, Y, Z. You have to be ready to think on your feet and change depending on what's available.
Yeah. Like we said, there are very few holes on teams in shallow leagues. So everyone is going to try and vie for the guy that puts up all the stats. You want to look at that, especially early on. You want to look at that and go, okay, which of these guys who puts up all the stats has the highest floor? And that's the guy I'm going to aim for. And if that guy falls to me, I'm definitely going to take him. But as you're moving through the draft, that floor starts to fall. And so you start to aim for upside. We talked about that a few minutes ago. And so I think in the first, I want to say probably 8 to 10 rounds, that's your foundation. If you're building a house, that is your concrete foundation that's in the floor. Those are the guys that are not going to move. You could trade them, but you're probably not going to drop them at any point in the season. What are you doing? What kind of upside are you looking for? What level of floor? I know that's kind of like a weird question, but what are you aiming for in like the middle rounds? Let's say you have a 22 round draft, which is the standard roster size for a 10-team league. If you're going from, let's say, like rounds 10 to 17, what are you looking for in there?
I think 10 to 17 is a really interesting spot. You can do a couple different things. One of the things that maybe you want to consider is the guys that have an injury risk tag to them. Because this is what we're talking about a bit as we talk about this transition from seeking high floor to seeking high ceiling. Audio listeners can't hear what I did, but I just did a hand motion that doesn't make sense for what I was saying. But I think about it, if you're getting around round 10, what positions do you have on your team? You probably have 3 to 4 pitchers. Maybe you have a little bit less, but let's say we're at 3 or 4 pitchers. And then the rest, obviously, you're going to have a few outfielders. You're going to have a shortstop. You're going to have
you should have a first baseman by then, I think.
Probably, yeah. You're going to have you're going to have dependable guys. You're going to have dependable guys already in your lineup. So you're not necessarily making up ground. The rest of the roster is going to be shifting a little bit. And we talked about earlier, what's the difference between larger formats and smaller formats? It's that by pick 100, you have 10 players on your team. I mean, it's as simple as that. The math just shakes out a little bit differently. And those are going to be good players, of course. So
those are great players.
Those are great players.
Like Brian Reynolds was in that range for like the last 5 years. And that's a very good, predictable floor player.
Yeah. I mean, Brian Reynolds is going to be Brian Reynolds. You know what he's going to do. More or less. Not on defense somehow, but that's irrelevant. He was that 1 year, he had like 13 outs above average, and it was like, what? Anyway.
Yeah. That's best signing the Pirates have made, and he was a homegrown talent. 8 years, 100-something million. Like, what a discount. Anyway.
Yeah. But for as we get into the later rounds, I think sometimes some players have injury tags to them that do have really high upsides, that playing time and finding guys that get a lot of at-bats in shallow leagues isn't going to be an issue. So taking a swing on guys that are able to have a higher rate floor. We talked about Corey Seager a bit, I think, pre-show, and we've talked about him before. He's a guy that I think his ADP is around 88 right now, and that's not necessarily the kind of place we're talking about him here, but people are going to be scared of Corey Seager because of the injuries. And I'm saying, guys, you get Corey Seager for 450 at-bats, it's going to be the best 450 at-bats a shortstop has, or right up there. And you're going to be able to supplement that production because there's a lot of stuff available. You're looking for upside here. You're looking for hitters. You're looking for guys, if you want young guys, players that really could find an X gear and really get moving and be productive. Maybe players that have had a little bit of difficulties in the past. If you're looking at pitchers, strikeout guys, players that have a really strong skill set in a few particular things, maybe a little weaker in another, that can quietly be really great if supplemented buy the really high floors you take earlier, because this is the time, right? We said foundations. You want a really strong foundation, but you also want to have a chandelier in your house. You know, it's
Nice.
it's fragile and it is really stunning, but it's going to be, you know,
Delicate.
it's delicate. Exactly.
Yeah. Coming from a Twins fan, I believe you're talking about Byron Buxton there.
He comes in minds. He comes in minds.
Possibly Royce Lewis too.
Okay,
Really,
no.
anybody the Twins
I don't
have
know about
drafted
Royce.
and developed.
Yeah, I know. I think I don't know what Buxton's ADP is at this point, but that's an example of a guy I'm thinking of, someone that
Yeah.
does have a lot of per game impact. I think
Yeah.
that's something you start to look at a lot more at this stage in the draft.
Yeah, especially in like a head-to-head categories league, because you're looking at this on almost like a week-to-week basis.
Yep.
Your foundational pieces, again, not moving, but the back 30% of your roster, which is what we're going to move into now, is what you can overturn basically on a whim to try and win on a week-to-week basis. And so you want to almost have that approach as who's going to give me a per game output that I'm just going to beat my opponent in the categories, because there's counting stats and then there's the average stats. And your foundation should help you in the average stats, and your margins, which is how you win head-to-head categories leagues, your margins are going to help you in the counting stats on a daily per game basis. And I think you look at that weekly, like I said, on the back 30% of your roster. Now, every year is different. So I'll ask you real quick just to wrap up this segment. How does your approach change each year? Does it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, something I personally like doing. This is not traditional fantasy baseball. Like, this is not traditional advice. I like a steady, sexy rotation. I like a lot of pitchers that I can look at and say, these guys are great. And this is kind of the high floor thing we're talking about, and sort of naturally risky. But on the flip side of things, my counter argument is everyone thinks that. And so we talk about zigs and zags earlier, value. I mean, guys that are really effective pitchers and they're going to be good. And even on a rate basis, you can go for that. Drafting some of those, I'm going to say second and third tier pitchers, Skubal and Skeens are going to be taken super high, Garrett Crochet, those guys, but kind of the like 8 to 20 range in pitchers, those guys fall to like the 6th round sometimes, and they can have a ton of production. I think people overlook that a lot. I also think sometimes there's certain positions I really wait for. Catcher is a huge one. Sometimes I wait super long for a catcher and I'll say, I'll just get some guy, and sometimes there's years where I see some catchers I really like and say, okay, I think they're going to have really strong production. I'm going to go for that. It's second base is another example. I'm really recently in. I'm like, I think Ketel Marte, he is one of the best values in baseball just because he's the best second baseman hitting in baseball. And there's like 4 second basemen that can hit anymore. So that kind of thing shifts a lot. And it's about value and keeping your script open-ended.
You know what's interesting? You touched upon waiting on catcher. I do that too. And now it works even better because that position is so deep that you can just wait. You don't have to reach for Kyle Raleigh this year. He's not going to hit 60 home runs again. Okay. He's a catcher who plays every single day. Okay. He's just not going to do it. I'm sorry. 40, 45, sure. But I'm not going to reach at that point in the draft just because, I'm going to fill catcher with Cal Raleigh. I'll wait and I'll take, literally anybody else. I'll take the 7 to 12 range catcher. I don't care, because as long as that player is not in a platoon, I'm good at that position. It's not going to hurt me. And I liked what you said about rotations as well, because I love to have 4 guys I can depend on every week. These 4 guys, they're the rocks of my rotation. And then I like to build 7 starters in my head-to-head categories leagues. I like to have 7 starting pitchers, mostly because I usually play in quality starts leagues. If you're playing in wins leagues, this strategy also helps. But 7 starters, I feel, has become like the magic number without an innings cap or floor. It's just, well, you can have a floor, but not a max. 7 starters, 4 rocks, 3. The last 3 can be either streamers or guys that are hot for like a while, right? Like, or they have, good matchups coming up. And I don't consider those streamers because I'm not adding and dropping them for that week. I'm planning on keeping them for, 3-4 weeks at a time. And I believe those pitchers that can fill out those last 3 spots are the injury guys that you can draft late in the draft too. Like last year, I drafted Yuri Perez towards the end of a draft because people totally forgot about him, and he came back and he was up and down, sure, but it was a high floor, or I should say high ceiling play late in the draft, low risk, and then I would have maybe 5 solid starting pitchers that I don't have to go stream for.
Yeah, and that's, as we're going to keep hammering home the difference between, those smaller leagues, and this is so true in an 8-team format. Like the difference between 8 to a 12 is night and day. I mean, the guys that are going to be on the wire that you can pick up in the middle of the year, they're going to have fine starts. You get a nice, as streaming becomes really easy at that point in at that kind of league, just because you're going to be able to find guys with decent matchups, and you're not looking for, Mitchell Parker.
Oh, good. Stay away from Mitchell Parker. And one of my favorite things that Nick over on the website usually writes in his recaps is, kids, don't trust the feds. Okay, so you want to stay away from that range of starting pitcher, the Eric Fetties, the Mitchell Parkers, the Drew Hurtses. Like, just stay away from those guys in shallow leagues. They will hurt you.
Yep.
Way more than they will help. But to figure out which of those players you maybe should target, we're going to have some advanced stats that we're going to tell you about that you can look at coming right up. All right, Carson. Advanced stats are going to help us find the gems in the draft, the gems on the wire, and really help us improve on the margins, which again is how you win head-to-head categories, shallow league formats. Either one, whether it's a deep head-to-head categories or just a shallow doesn't matter. Those 2 types of leagues, you are going to win by improving on the margins. So what advanced stats are most helpful pre-draft, which is kind of the season that we're in right now?
So, yeah, I mean, really, we're right in the thick of draft season. So this stuff is going to be really, really important. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, but we're going to get some real interesting data on, if anything shifted in the offseason, because it happens so frequently and can change so much about a pitcher's value. Eric, the most reliable stat, all the metrics, all the pitch modeling, all what I call the Kyle stuff. Kyle Bland, the stats guy here, Data Wiz, he makes all sorts of these models. And all of that stuff does not do as strong of a job as predicting future performance as K- walk percentage. It is the best stat for single stat for figuring out a player's consistency year over year. And K- walk percentage is really great for a very obvious reason. If you strike guys out, that's good. If you allow walks, that's bad. The difference between the two is sort of a measure of your stuff and your ability to get guys out against your ability to lose control while doing it. There's plenty of guys that have really high strikeout rates or strong strikeout rates, but also strong walk or also weak walk rates, meaning, a 27% strikeout rate and 9% walk rate, which is going to be less effective in many cases than a guy with, say, a 25% strikeout rate and a 6% walk rate. And that's
sorry to interrupt, but a guy who comes to mind as a perfect example of that is Luis Gil, because he strikes out a lot of guys and walks a ton.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're totally right. Luis Gil is a guy that he had the Rookie of the Year campaign. He was really effective for them at that time, but it was like the foundations of what you can expect year over year. You don't have a lot of trust in those guys because there's so much that can go wrong. And it's just, they're living on the edge, not of the strike zone, but of just like of productivity. So K- walk percentage is great. And year over year, it's really, really consistent. If you find a guy that has over 20 K- walk percentage, 20 is great. There's about 7 to 8 guys that have that year over year. Those guys, if you're looking for high floor, those are your guys. Around 18 to 17, that's when it starts falling off. Around 15, you really have to pump the brakes a bit. But K- walk percentage, it's a simple stat. It's hardly even advanced, but it's about as good as it gets.
Nice. I personally, when it comes to pitchers, I love to see swing strike rate. It's indicative of their ability to miss bats. Simple as that. I like guys who are 12 and up. As you get later into the season, earlier in the season, you want to see that number be higher, because typically it takes hitters a little bit longer to get going recently, especially in the cold weather. Would you think, oh, it would take pitchers? Well, yeah, pitchers might not go as long, but actually they're slightly more effective earlier in the season. So I like to see a higher swing strike rate earlier, and then as it gets later in the season, I want to be around 12 or higher for the guys that I'm targeting, especially as streamers looking on the wire. Again, marginal improvement. I see the next stat you have here for pitchers is Stuff Plus.
Yep. Stuff Plus is an interesting one. I am relative to, I think, a lot of guys in the community that are really looking at pitch modeling in the next kind of era of stats. I think I might even be relatively conservative as far as utilizing pitch modeling, but I think it's definitely something fantastic to know how nasty is a guy. How nasty is their stuff? And if you have someone with a high Stuff Plus, you simply know they've got it. They've got something in their game, and this can be applied in two ways, right? If you have a high Stuff Plus and you know they're effective, their floor is going to be high. They're going to be great because their stuff is great and because they're able to locate and utilize it well. On the flip side of things, if you have a guy with a really nice Stuff Plus, however, their ERA is lacking from the previous year, they're not able to get it done, that's chasing a ceiling on the flip side, because they have that X factor, they have that stuff, they have the usually, flirting with triple digit velocity, gnarly breaking things. And that's the kind of thing that really can turn a fairly mediocre pitcher into someone that is an ace tier caliber player. We saw stuff like this with Garrett Crochet a bit ago. His Stuff Plus was obviously through the roof. He had trouble, staying healthy, trouble locating. There was potential there. Things snapped into place. He's an ace. And I want to point out where we are right now. There's news for this year. Every single spring training stadium has StatCast data. So you will be able to look up pitch by pitch data, and you won't necessarily be able to do it by yourself with Stuff Plus. There's some people you can do to look at that, but you're going to know pitcher stuff for every pitch thrown this spring. And that is huge for being able to analyze how a pitcher is performing. If you see ticks in velocity, if you see big breaking movements, if you see a lot of movement on your fastball, a lot of IVB, those are the things that are eye-catching, and it's too important not to get too attached to them. Spring is a myth.
It's weird.
Spring is very weird, and it's not sticky at all. But if you throw a ball hard, you throw a ball hard, and that's just velocity is better.
There is a specific stat on Baseball Reference, and I'm blanking on it at the moment. I'm trying to bring it up, but there's a specific stat that shows spring training opponent quality. Oh, that's what it is. It's called OpQual. If you seriously, if you look at the stat, it's called opponent quality. I think if you can combine the data that you see, the Stuff Plus, the StatCast metrics that we're going to have access to this spring training, and you combine that with opponent quality, you can see if things are real or not. Low opponent quality numbers means, maybe they were going up against a lot of minor leaguers. High opponent quality means probably going up against a lot of major league caliber players. So I think if you combine those two, you can really kind of have a better idea if the spring stats are more indicative of true performance or not. But again, you still take it with a grain of salt because it's the spring and it's weird.
That's real quick. That's the thing about why StatCast is so important for doing spring scouting, is because you don't have to worry about if they're going against some AA 19-year-olds or whatever. You can look at guys and see what the pitches are, and a 98-mile-an-hour fastball is a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. You don't care who it's against. Could be you, could be Aaron Judge. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
So the last stat you have here that you look at, it is literally the opposite of advanced. It has been around since baseball started, and it's innings.
I wrote innings. I wrote innings on it, and it's because, we can look at all the advanced stats, and I want to talk about it, but let's flip to make sure we're tied down here, and we say, you need guys that pitch. You need guys that have volume. You need, as we're looking for floors, you can't just be enticed by the rate stats and by the strikeouts and by the whiffs and everything. You got to pitch the dang ball. And innings, Logan Webb. Logan Webb is the prime example of a guy that just, he goes deep into games. He's the way he pitches, he gets a ton of guys out. This is relevant a lot more if you're in quality starts leagues, but it's also something even with just strikeouts, because one of the ways to get strikeouts is you just pitch a lot of volume. Someone, if maybe a little lacking on the rate stats, is going to make up for if they pitch a lot. It's very simple, and I won't obviously spend time on why innings are important, but it's something that can be overlooked, or maybe just simply isn't sexy enough, but it's essential.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's kind of what made Sandy Alcantara very relevant before his Tommy John surgery. Was
Sandy was nuts.
Yeah, because he just threw so many innings. Maybe why he needed Tommy John surgery. Just a thought. Anyway, moving on, hitters. Here's a very interesting stat. I actually have never heard of this before reading what you added to our rundown here. Blast percentage. What is that?
So blast percentage, we were talking about this earlier. StatCast bat tracking is probably what I think is the next frontier for hitter evaluation, looking at how a batter actually swings, how that impacts things. So a squared up ball is a new term that's on StatCast, and a squared up ball is basically taking the two forces at play during a pitch and a batted ball, right? Which is the speed and velocity of the pitch itself, the ball, as well as the speed velocity of the bat and the angle which it travels. And the squared up percentage is how much force that those two things, the swing speed and the pitch speed, how much force is generated to get a max exit velocity out of that result, right? So we were talking about this earlier. A combination of those two forces that could maximum result in a 100 mile per hour exit velocity. If the end result is 75 miles an hour, it's a 75% squared up percentage. And a squared up ball is really important, because that's going to kind of be your measure of how good a player's actual contact skill is. Because contact isn't just hitting a ball and making contact with the wood. It's about being able to beat the fielders. And that's where blast percentage comes in play. Because the other thing about squared up percentage or squared up balls is that it doesn't have a bat speed minimum. So a little check swing dinker could have a high squared up rate relatively, but it's still not going to go far just because the two forces aren't that strong. What blast percentage looks at is the swing speed, and it has a certain threshold of a swing speed, and it has the squared up percentage, a squared up swing, which means it needs to have a fast swing and a swing that results in an efficient use of power effectively. And so when looking at blast percentage, what you're measuring and how to utilize this is when a player swings the bat, how often are they making good contact with it? And it's not just, they're hitting, and we're not just looking at data like the, result data of fly balls or launch angle or anything like that. We're just looking at raw power. And that's a very good indicator of how effective their contact is. So let me read off some hitters real quick. We were talking about this earlier. The per swing, the blast percentage in Major League Baseball last year per swing. The top guys: Juan Soto, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Yandy Diaz, Ben Rice, Michael Garcia, Shohei Ohtani, Kyle Schwarber, Alejandro Kirk Jr., Caminero, Pete Alonso, Aaron Judge at 11. That's not in order the list of the best hitters in baseball, but it is a list of the best hitters in baseball. It is guys that make really efficient use of their contact. And I like blast percentage a lot because it's a great way of seeing pretty much everything a hitter has to offer, their raw power, as well as their ability to make strong contact with said power and utilize it into production. And you can use that with a bunch of other stats, and no stat has really independent usage, but it's a great way of measuring the health of a batter.
I love that. I had never heard of blast percentage before looking at what you added to the rundown here, like I said, and it is fascinating. And I think that's a great stat to look at. There's a bunch of other stats that you can take time to sort of evaluate, you know, contact percentage in the zone, swinging strike rate, exit velo, launch angle, or you could just look at blast percentage and see, you know, how good is it? And
Yeah.
that is so much more efficient, and I love that. So thank you for that. I love that tip. Everybody used blast percentage. That's fantastic. A couple others here. I just want to run through real quick. You have bat speed and chase percentage.
These are going to require a lot less explanation. So, also, of course, go on the MLB.com website and have a glossary if you want a real full deep dive into any of these stats that we're talking about. But bat speed is very simple. On average, how hard do you swing the bat? It can be a little deceiving. Average swing speed is obviously just measuring the average, and sometimes, that can be not quite a complete representation of a guy's maximum power when they really decide to go after one, but it's a very good indicator of how healthy their swing are. Around 70 to 71 miles an hour is average. And it's very simple. You swing the bat harder, there's more force in it, the ball is going to go further. And it's also going to be simply hit harder, which means there's going to be more base hits. And so bat speed it's not a perfect correlation between, hitter success and being a poor hitter, but the best hitters in baseball swing hard. Simple as that.
Chase percentage, I believe, is your ability to not chase the ball out of the zone.
Yep.
Super simple, which means you make good swing decisions. You want hitters who make good swing decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not just being able to lay off those pitches that's so fantastic. It's being able to recognize strong pitches and um and not chasing things. Because a batted ball way outside is going to be a batted ball. See that clip of Vladimir Guerrero swinging at a ball that bounced all you want. It's it's going to result in suboptimal contact. And so guys that avoid that, guys that are careful, especially, OBP leagues, that's something that really is a nice indicator of, how high is their floor, which is something we've said so many times now, but just how effective can they be at limiting bad appearances?
I love that. Chase percentage, also to me, like I just mentioned, goes along with contact percentage. So you want to make sure that guys are hitting the ball when they do swing, not just swinging and making good swing decisions, because you can make the best swing decisions and not make contact. so you want to make sure that the contact percentage is there with a good chase percentage. Going through the season, what stats do you use and how is the last bit we have here on the rundown. We'll just go through it real quick. You have BABIP abnormalities, swing decisions, and whiffs, which kind of just plays into, swing strike rate and all that.
What we were talking about earlier, yeah. Well, BABIP's been on the mind for me a lot recently, as
deep.
you know, but basically you're just looking at kind of month by month if there's anything really weird. Like, simple as that. If someone has a BABIP crazy guy and everything else looks bad, but their BABIP is really high, but everything else looks poor, you're going to expect regression. And it goes to the flip side. If their BABIP's really low, they're hitting 220 BABIP and everything else seems really strong. Great example last year, Juan Soto had a crazy low BABIP the first few months of the year, and people were freaking out. Oh, the Mets spend $765 million on the guy that isn't really that great, and he turns it on in the middle of June. He's electric, and that's because, these things regress, and regress is a scary term to use, and I've talked about how it's not always something that you can depend on. Some guys play baseball in a way that commands a higher low BABIP, but there are abnormalities, and you have to be aware of that, on the lookout, because you just want to short at the right time. basically.
I will say this about regression, because it is a term thrown around in fantasy baseball circles left and right. Like, I don't know.
It's all the time. It's
Yeah,
all the time.
All the time. What does that mean? Regression just means a movement to the average.
Yep.
That's what it means. It does not mean going backwards. It does not mean getting worse. It can mean getting worse, but it can also mean getting better, because you can regress upwards to the mean, or you can regress downwards to the mean, depending on how the stats are relative to the mean. If like you said, Juan Soto, his BABIP was super low. It was well below his career norm. It was well below the league average. So he positively regressed in the second half of the last season. On the other hand, if you have a BABIP of like 450 and your career average is 280 in your BABIP, you're probably going to regress backwards to the mean. So please, when you hear regression, don't panic and understand all it means is movement towards the middle.
And you got to understand, this is something I'm going to be writing about a lot. It's just like necessarily high or low numbers does not necessarily dictate by itself that regression's coming. Aaron Judge had a 376 BABIP last year, but that's because Aaron Judge hit the ball so dang hard that there was a hit a lot of the time. And that's the kind of thing that I've been working on, that I've been writing on, is trying to do all this analysis to really figure it out. But Cal Raleigh, 248 BABIP last year. Aaron Judge, 367. Those numbers make sense with how they play baseball. So don't just read the numbers at a face value. Look for the abnormalities in their game to really see who is going to have that regression coming.
Again, regression, not a scary word. Do not run away from it. But that does it for our very first episode. If there was a cheer button, I'd hit it. We'd celebrate as we set sail here in search of fantasy baseball treasure. We'll be back next Friday with a brand new episode 2 of The Shallows. So to make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe. We're available wherever you get your podcasts. For Carson Picard, at Carson Picard on Blue Sky, I'm Eric Henriksen at Eric Hin. That's Eric with a K, by the way, on Blue Sky, saying murky waters are fine if you know how to swim. See you next time in The Shallows.
Take care, y'all.